where the monies do not get committed. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, the level of self-determined governance that raises the standard for everyone living in the village. Let me just ask you this. Do you believe that there is an excess amount of corruption happening in Jamaica, as well as many, many other countries where this disparity between the wealthy, the middle class, and the poor exists?
Yes, it is because they have a class system. You know,
Hmm.
they make sure that people have made sure that they clarify that for me that, Jamaica doesn't have the colorism as much as the US has, but Jamaica has a class system.
Hmm. Yeah. And so let's get into today's dialogue. Let me introduce the dialogue for those who are just tuning in today on LIBRadio. We continue this series with Dr. Money on how we can fund our Kujichagulia Villages project towards creating the life that we desire outside of the dominance and control of sinister corporations and their like. It is critically necessary that we take responsibility for building our own intentional communities. Our Kujichagulia villages will satisfy our needs and desires. Is that a good way of introducing today's dialogue?
Oh, absolutely. I think it really is. And, last week when we had the conversation, we were talking about not only, first, what is it, right? Define it. And this week last week we touched on kind of high level that funding is important in this process as well. Funding shows up in this process depending upon how far along you are in your development process. And I think that that's something that oftentimes entrepreneurs, creators, visionaries, if it is that they don't understand funding, they go about their process out of sequence. They go looking for funding before they have anything that warrants funding.
Hmm.
And so that's why timing is very important. And what that means is, and developing what it is that you want, right? Having a vision and then going and doing the investigation necessary to begin to validate and perfect that vision. And then that then presents to you different funding sources. So some of those sources look like, for example, there are specific uh, outside institutions and organizations, cooperatives that form themselves to look for ways to invest in developing countries. And when you are looking at, for example, like the US government, the CIA websites to gain information on a country, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, all of those different organizations are meant to help facilitate development by one, ensuring that a particular government isn't just stealing all the development funds that are coming into the country. So let's start there. What is the stability of the government? Are they known to be so corrupt that it doesn't matter who comes in? They just take your money for their own interest, and you are never able to execute on your business, your vision, or what it is that you have planned.
Hmm.
Now, this is something that happens as well here in Jamaica. It is said that a lot of people came into the country early to invest in the cannabis space, for example. And sadly, many of those folks, failed to execute those ventures and left the country disappointed. that they had made those types of investments. And so these are the things that become really important when you're thinking about not only what it is that you're looking to create, but where it is that you're looking to create. You must understand what the governmental policies are. And it's the same thing. I mean, if I'm doing a development in the US, when we developed our properties in the Park La Brea community, we don't just go straight to our development plan. We meet with the local officials that have governance over those particular assets and discuss with them what it is we're considering and are proposing within their community to make sure that it's aligned with what it is the community desires for itself. And
Mm-hmm.
often in that initial conversation is where they too share, hey, yes, we're interested in this, and we also have these other resources that have been brought to our attention that would foster these types of developments, and or we have these type of regulatory tools where we can impact things. So for example, if you're developing in an area that lacks infrastructure, well, it's clear that the infrastructure is partially, at least for common areas, that's the responsibility of the government. They should have a budget for that, right? And
Right.
so you want to understand, that's why the first thing that I say when I visit any site, my first look at a site is with my civil engineer, because we're looking for those types of things. What type of infrastructure is available? What type of infrastructure needs to be available? Where has the common area been developed? And where does that begin and end in relationship to where we're looking to develop?
Mm-hmm.
Some of that development, we're going to take our part, but we also want the government to pitch in and pay their part too.
Mm-hmm.
Because, our project may not sustain the total cost, and it shouldn't, right? Because others are going to come behind us and now benefit because we have invested this part. And so that we don't get to tax those people, but the government does.
Mm.
So they need to, you know what I'm saying? You can't make us carry the full burden. Our project won't work if we have to carry the full burden. But that's why
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand all of these things. You need to understand all of these things before you even understand what you can pay for the dirt. And this is where most people make a mistake. If you go and buy the dirt at a price before you understand all of these costs, you've lost your project, because you can never make up the mistake of paying too much for the dirt. You can never recoup that upstream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the point you make about the government and the larger community, which is represented by the government, having a stake in the village, I think is a very, very important point, because ultimately the village has to integrate itself into the larger society. It's going to pay taxes, it's going to hopefully create a lot of jobs, and but it will need the government to rely upon for roads, for sanitation, for water, electricity, and other critical elements. Certain parts of those elements could and should be developed by the community, such as renewable energy is something that I think would be an advantage to the community for developing, but it is going to take a much larger partnership. That's the point I'm making.
Absolutely, because even with that, if you develop renewable energy on your site and you have excess capacity, you can sell that back to a grid. But there
Mm-hmm.
needs to be a grid for you to sell it back to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if there's no grid, well, then now, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that you won't still create that development. Absolutely, you will. But you also realize that you have to accommodate for the fact of how do you store. What are your options for battery storage of that additional capacity that you have no ability to distribute at the moment, but what other things does it present as possibilities? And all of those things have to be factored into the overall plan. And so usually what happens is a community, so for example, in Los Angeles or in Las Vegas, the city puts together what they call as their general plan. And the general plan is usually developed in 10-year cycles. And what the general plan is aimed to do is to evaluate what are all the needs of the communities. What are the schools? What are the resources that need to be available for the community to function? What is happening environmentally? What's happening with the assets within the community? Are there certain areas within the community where the housing stock is old? Are there buildings that are becoming obsolete because they are so old, right? Are there basically ghettos forming in parts of the community as migration patterns change and shift? And so all of these particular things, what type of infrastructure has the community or does the community need to invest in to remain relevant, to have the capacity to house? These days, when you think about it, if you're looking at an older property doesn't have enough electrical outlets to accommodate today's technology user.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a hotel, if you have an office built, you know what I mean? So it's like all of these things. So the community does an updated general plan. And in that plan, they determine zoning. What kind of uses are we going to allow on these parcels of land that are within our purview, right? And those are the decisions that inform what can be developed where, when it can be developed, how it must be developed, what the lot sizes are. If you're doing a master plan community, you can't determine what the lot sizes are. You have to be instructed on what the lot sizes are. And within those lot sizes, that's what your project has to conform to. Because even though it's your community development, you do not control and have ultimate jurisdiction over the area that you're developing in. You must
Mm-hmm.
abide by those constructs. And so you need to understand what they are.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully by the end of today's program, people will get a clearer vision of what it is that many of us have claimed now, because I've been championing this idea of the Kujichagulia villages since 2008. We'll have a clearer idea of the things necessary for us to be able to put together the village. Of course, everything begins with the vision, defining the goal, the vision, and then from there, different steps. You're going to gather your core group that's going to begin to put it together, choose a governance model, and various other things, including work out the logistics of a planned community. It can seem overwhelming, Dr. Steph.
Well, but listen here, Katie, it's really not. It's really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what you have to think about is it's an elephant, right? But you don't eat an elephant in one bite. You just need to
Mm.
understand. What I'm doing is helping you understand the pieces, right? But we're going to break those pieces down because they have a sequence in how they flow and how they happen. So, yes, in the beginning, it's come up with your outlandish ideas, whatever they are. We're not shooting them down. We're welcoming those ideas, right? But
That's right.
then we're going to go and start thinking about now, where do we want to bring this idea to life?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as we begin to understand what it takes to bring it to life, now we're able to start to refine our diamond and shape it accordingly. It's still a diamond, it's just
Mm-hmm.
in its roughest form. And when we begin to understand that, then we begin to understand how we can find pieces of that puzzle. You put together a capital stack for a project like this, because there's different types of capital that comes in at different intersections and
Mm-hmm.
departs at certain intersections. You know what I'm saying? So it's not that one source of capital takes you from the beginning to the end. That's not how this works. So you must first kind of go, okay, this is what it is we want to do. This is where it is we want to do it. All right. Then the first bucket of capital that we need to come up with about 250, just say to $500,000. That's our first bucket of capital that we need to put together. Because
Mm-hmm.
now we have to go and start developing the plans. What would the rough plans require for this beautiful vision that's being conceived? Now we got to start getting some of the understanding. And that money you're required to come up with. That's the equity. An investor is not going to bring that to you. They want you to have done that work. They want you to have demonstrated that you understand your job in developing a community is you must be able to monetize that development. That's the job of a developer. You know how to get capital, and you know where the capital sources are, and you know when the capital sources enter. So there's a lot of capital that's not going to enter until the equity piece has been exhausted. And so how you come up with what the typical equity piece looks like, or what that number needs to be, is you start to get an idea of what is the total cost of my project. And then the first in equity is somewhere between 15 and 25% of that
Mm.
cost,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? And
that's
so
right.
this is kind of how we get it started. So the very first thing that you want to do is, at this point, is you want to start understanding which developers would be interested in being our lead developer, the master developer on this project. And so there's two types of developers. There's developers that develop only their own projects. They
Mm-hmm.
don't work for other people on their projects. And then there's other developers that will do development for hire deals with somebody that has an idea but doesn't have the understanding, the skill sets, the ability to actually execute. Because also a developer must bring a certain skill set. So if you have parts of, when you're doing a master plan, for example, when you determine the different types of uses and the program for those uses and the structures of those uses, right? Then there's certain developers that develop those types of assets. Your commercial assets require a different set of expertise than some of the residential assets. And especially if you're talking about vertical assets. So where you see a mixed use development that has 3 or 4, 5 stories, and it has retail on the ground floor, right? That's a different type of developer than a developer that develops single family homes on just
Mm-hmm.
5 acre lots. It's a
Mm-hmm.
different discipline, and it's a different entire team, because the developers that have to go vertical in any way, they have to know how to build integrated infrastructure, and the foundation also is different, right? And so all of those utility, things have to be worked out differently in those types of projects, which is why a mixed use developer that builds commercial on spec
Mm-hmm.
often suffers more than a mixed use developer that first identifies who the tenants would be, so that they could properly, if I've got a restaurant over here, I know I have to have certain venting and circulation for a restaurant. That has to be built in at the beginning, because once I go vertical and start building units, you're not going to go tear into those units and try to add venting. Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's not happening then.
Yeah, that
So
makes
you
good
just
sense.
lost the value of that project. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Well,
forever obsolete, because it limits the type of tenants that can occupy that space.
That's right. That is so, so very important. For those of you just tuning in, I am today here with Dr. Steph. We're continuing a series we've been doing on the Kujichagulia villages, funding these intentional communities. So we're into it. I hope you are digging it. To those who may be unfamiliar with the idea, if you look behind me, this is an AI artist rendering of what a Kujichagulia village in our minds looks like. We're designing these homes in a traditional African style roundhouses. We're not imitating others by building square buildings like they build. Nothing to say anything negative about square buildings, but we as Africans have a deeper aesthetic, cultural aesthetic that goes way, way back. But we do like to live in modern homes with all of the amenities of modern homes, which can be built into roundhouse designs. So I'm asking you, our listening audience, to weigh in on it. What is your opinion of us taking responsibility for building these Kujichagulia villages for our ethnicity, and further for us purposing these villages for what we intend to leave as a legacy for our people? One of the things we've talked about quite a bit here on LIB Radio is the critical need for us to plan to enter and compete in the global wellness economy, which was predicted to grow some 2.9 to 3.1 trillion dollars after reaching 5.5 trillion in 2023. You know about this global wellness economy, Dr. Seth.
Absolutely. And it's on fire. And the evidence of how it's on fire, it's like there's a perfect storm. Because
Mm-hmm.
who would have known that JFK would be let loose in the US and getting dyes and poisons out of the food, making the soft drinks go back to sugar cane. I'm sitting
That's
here
right.
going like, I may have another soft drink again. You know,
That's
like
right.
wow,
Eh,
this is what I'm talking about. I'm like, let's go, baby, let's
That's
go.
right. And of course, you are talking about Robert RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and his whole idea of being against artificial colors, artificial flavors, feeding children the food that makes them mentally unbalanced, etc. Robert F. K., for us who are in the wellness development community, he has been a godsend. Then, of course, he is getting quite a bit of resistance from the entrenched capitalist forces, especially the drug companies are financing a tremendous opposition. Did you want to comment further on Dr. on
Well,
Robert F.
yeah.
Kennedy?
Oh, well, nothing more about that, but yes, that's why this whole situation is what it is. Like right now,
Mm-hmm.
this is why it was so clear to me that back in 2020, when I knew that I could pivot, but pivot and build here in Jamaica,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really, you sometimes you think you feel it, something is nudging you. But this was divine intervention and divine guidance because had I not started then, and even then it was difficult because I was in law school and I also
Mm-hmm.
had made my mind, I was not going to drop out of law school because that was a personal something that I was doing for myself and I was going to get me my gift for me, you know.
Okay.
And so that put me in a certain situation because law school is demanding and grueling and you know it requires a lot of you in time and commitment, and to be putting together a startup business requires a lot of you, and somewhere in there you have to sustain yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to have, if you're not independently wealthy, you also have to generate some income, and then also somewhere in there you need to sleep.
That is a critical need as well.
So
Mm-hmm.
but now to be where I am, I have such a moat around the next person trying to execute at the level of what we have developed, that when we come to market, we're about to set the market on fire, especially with our SOAR ibogaine spas that deal with addiction, PTSD, and concussion brain recovery. Oh
Mm-hmm.
man, the US right now is on fire educating the market about ibogaine and its benefits. Hallelujah. I would have had
Mm-hmm.
to invest that money in educating the market, but to now have them be spending all the money in educating, but also only because they want to make the treatment a drug. They want to move the people from one addiction to another drug. Whereas you can come to our spa and you're going to get it in its plant based purity, and you won't need any more drugs. You're one and done, baby. One and done, and you get your life back. So
Mm-hmm.
so it's just like OMG. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. But yes, this is a huge, huge market. Huge market, huge opportunity, and all of the rest of our wellness spas. We don't need you to struggle with your addictions and your trauma. We're going to heal you. Then you can go play through the rest of our portfolio. You can go experience Amani Haba. You can go experience 420 Wellness. You can go experience Turquoise. You know, you could go experience those particular brands and their respective offering, you know, but you'll be
Mm-hmm.
healthy by starting off at Sora Ibogaine Spa if you need support, because this also deals with behavioral addictions. So, you know, it's not just that it's a chemical. Are you, you know, overly distracted with gambling and, you know, other kind of behavioral addictions that are causing, you know, disruption in your family life, in your overall well-being? Those things are creating stressors, and the thing is that it's the side diseases that emerge from those stressors. But anyway, I'm sorry, Katie, let me get back
Well,
on topic. I just, you
well,
know, this is so critical and so important, and it's so exactly what you're saying. And also, even I would just say, why even understanding in your design the benefit of having a circular structure, you know,
that's
because
right.
again, all of these things are contributing to a resetting of our natural rhythms and necessity for our well-being. So we want to go and create communities that reflect our natural needs, operate off of our natural holistic systems holistically. So where
That's
we
right.
live does matter.
That's
How
right.
we
Where we live
design
does
does
matter.
matter.
And let me add this point because it's very relevant. That ibogaine that you mentioned, which is a traditional African herb with many, many uses for addiction, treating addiction, all kind of addictions. Ibogaine is still illegal in the United States, but in
Exactly.
Jamaica or Ghana or Uganda, Kenya, other countries where we are planning on extending ourselves into, ibogaine
Absolutely.
does not have that import restriction. Very
Absolutely. And that
important.
is exactly why we are here in Jamaica, opening up our first locations. And guess where we're going next? We're going home to Africa to open up the next set of locations. Absolutely. That is why we are here. And we are right now, our first location to open up November 1st. In fact, now we're starting to collect a waiting list. So we're setting our, starting to collect our waiting list for the November 1st location here in Jamaica. So we're,
Hmm.
you know, you're going to hear more and more about that, the team and all of the marketing and all of those things. We're about to press go.
That's right. Very, very important.
Yes.
Okay. We are here today with Dr. Steph. We would love it to have some of you join in the conversation as well. You can you can type in the chat box. We are on rumble.com, on youtube.com. We'd love to hear from you today. What is on your mind? What are you hearing that you would like to respond to? And of course, I'm asking you, do you believe in this shared vision that Dr. Steph and I have been really quite excited about us building in the wellness economy for our own future development? Let me hear from you. Talk to us now. So let's get forward again to the topic of funding the Kujichagulia villages, part two. What are we extending on from last week's conversation?
So again, we were talking about initially that the reason that you want to understand government infrastructure is because that ends up being some of the sources of funds, right? So you want to understand where the country stands, what is the country's rating on a global scale, and then that lets you know, are there international monetary funds? Are there other type of global social impact funds? Are there family offices? For example, there's social impact initiatives where wealthy families, when they have wealth, they either have their money managed by a single or a multiple family office. And what the family office does is handles all of the decisions that they have made. They execute on those decisions on behalf of those wealthy investors. So each family can say, well, I'm really interested in entrepreneurship, but I'm really passionate about developing, because I'm a real estate developer and community developer. I want to develop communities in these emerging markets. So I want to allocate 5% of my wealth towards projects that meet XYZ criteria so that we can help finance these projects because we want to see this continue. Because typically
Mm-hmm.
when a family makes a plan, they create a multi-generational wealth plan. In fact, that's why my family offices that are opening up in Dubai, I have developed a model for 100-year sustainable wealth plan for families, right? And so
100
it
years.
100 years. So it's a 100-year family plan. And what
Mm-hmm.
that plan does is it ensures that not only the founder of the plan, but that every heir that's alive at the time that the plan is being crafted have their educational process along the plan. It's part of their requirements that they have to learn certain things about the plan. They have to work within the plan invested businesses, or you know what I mean? They have to pick an area of the family plan if they're interested in the social impact initiatives, or if they're interested in the other areas that the plan touches on. They want to be a financier. Whatever it is their goals are, they have to work within the plan assets that the family has created, because they have to, before they even receive their allotted disbursements. And then there are certain ways that they are able to access their, if they want to buy a car at a certain time, if they want to start a business at a certain time, and there's certain intervals that they have to meet a certain criteria, because again, the family wealth plan is aimed at preserving the family wealth
Mm-hmm.
while also stimulating new innovation and impact through their heirs.
Mm.
So
That's
it's
very.
so exciting is because of this. So this is a prime example. So
Mm-hmm.
because of this, and because my approach to this is that there's new uh, heirs who are now inheriting the funds from their boomer parents, right? These younger generations, parents are dying off and they're beginning to become now the decision makers with these family assets. And so what I'm noticing is some of these younger folks have different interests than what their parents had. Their parents may have been, in the Buffett bucket and was kind of following overall that kind of mentality around investment, whereas some of these younger, millennials and these generations, they're interested in digital currencies, they're interested in, space exploration, they're interested in social impact initiatives, because they've gone to all of these prestigious universities, but they also, because they've been able to travel the world, they know that there's devastation in other parts of the world, and they believe that their money can allow them to be impactful. So they're not just in it for themselves. They're really interested in using they've had money all their lives. So having more is not really changing anything for them. It's what can we do with this money to build our own independent
Mm-hmm.
legacies, right? And so that's where another source of money exists. And so that's again with the family office structure. But because I came into Jamaica, so typically, if I was just a hoteler, like any other hoteler coming into Jamaica, I could have come in, set up my business, hired 5 people, and been perfectly fine within how the hotel ecosystem operates here. But that wasn't my
Mm-hmm.
intention. I came with a different intention. I had that opportunity to do that 30 years ago. A major
Mm-hmm.
brand was going to be building a new hotel, and a colleague of mine, they were the people developing it. And I was still in advertising at the time, and I was exploring moving into real estate development. And they said, hey, we'll give you an opportunity to work on this development project in Jamaica on this particular hotel brand. And I was still,
Okay.
late 20s, and my mom was still alive. And it was like, no, I'd never been to Jamaica. I had no, it was like, yeah, I'm not that adventurous, so I'm not ready. But when I
Mm.
finally came to Jamaica for my first time 25 years ago, what struck me immediately, because now I'm like, well, let me see what happened in the hospitality. Immediately, what I saw, I remember we were out on a glass bottom boat, and I was looking back at the island in the grill. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw that all these big hotels, they hire 5 people, and the rest of the people are, their little houses look like they're ready to fall over, and then
Mm.
the people walking on the beach trying to sell something, trying to get any of the tourism dollar, because they basically put them in a lock system. They don't let them leave, really. They keep all the money to themselves. They're making
Mm-hmm.
fake Jamaican food instead of letting them sample real Jamaican idol food. It's right down the way, but they won't let them
Mm-hmm.
patronize those businesses. They keep it all for themselves. So it was clear that when I came to Jamaica, I was going to develop the ecosystem. I'm not just going to hire 5 people. I'm building out a complete supply chain of vendors that I know. And then I learned those vendors. So now I understand their gaps. I know that customer service sucks in many of these young
Mm.
vendors. They don't know how to have customer service. They don't know how to operate at a level. So now I kind of became a little bit more understanding of why some of the other hotel developed. Nobody wanted to take them on as a project, but I developed an infrastructure to be able to take them on as a project. And so as a result of that, I was mentioning to another colleague who we're collaborating on some other business. He's like, oh my God, Stephanie, we want to bring billions of dollars to your innovation venture labs, community venture projects, because we have all of these billionaires that have allocated so much of their money for social impact initiatives, and they don't have the right kind of projects that they believe in. But your projects are so well developed that we want to put that money towards what you're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't be offering to want to do that if I hadn't already developed something. You know what I mean? So it's a point of what I'm saying in terms of our same planning, right? As you're planning this village, we have to start building the pieces of the asset public, the intellectual property, some of the what can we do right now? What can we begin to monetize right now? How can we at least start getting our community on a mailing list? Remember when Facebook launched, Facebook didn't have a monetization plan. They built a community
Mm-hmm.
first. And then by the time they had such a large community, then they could decide, now that I have this community, how can I monetize it?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of that same thing. And so that brings me to another form of fundraising. That is the beauty of what crowdfunding allows you to do. And in fact, that is what we watched even when I was part of the venture team in Newport Beach, when I was part of K5 Ventures. What we saw is a lot of the high net worth individuals in some of our investment forums didn't necessarily know how to truly evaluate the merits of a business. And because nobody knows if the market is going to adopt or not adopt what it is you're bringing to market, what they started to see when crowdfunding platforms began to emerge is if a person went and did a crowdfunding campaign and the community responded, then they would write a check to support that venture, because they said, well, these are the same people that you're going to be trying to market to. So if they're interested, if they're on,
All right. Dr. Steph has unfortunately muted. Hopefully, she'll be back with us here in just a second. And we are live and direct. I see Brother Nguvu is in the house. Welcome, Brother Nguvu. And here, let me just 1 second. I want to get his message and read that on the air while we're waiting for Dr. Steph to rejoin us. Nguvu is in the house, and he says, Sawubona, which means, of course, I see you in the language of our South African brothers and sisters. Sawubona, our villages, our future. And I do definitely agree. Greetings to you and Google. Our responsibility is to our future. Our children must inherit wealth, period. And so, welcome to you. And we're going to continue with Dr. Steph as soon as we get her back online. She is, of course, in Jamaica. And we do appreciate Dr. Steph joining us from Jamaica. It's a little bit of work. Sometimes it does go to left field, but we do the best we can. I did pull up, she had mentioned IBO gain, and I'm going to be doing a report on IBO gain next week because this is really, truly awesome. IBO gain, a psychoactive indole alkaloid derived from the root bark of the Tabemanthe iboga plant, known for its hallucinogenic and oneirogenic effects. Traditionally used by Central African forager tribes, it has been studied for its potential in treating substance use disorders, particularly opioid addiction, by alleviating withdrawal symptoms and cravings. However, its clinical use is limited due to regulatory barriers and serious safety risks, including cardiotoxicity. Ibogaine interacts with multiple neurotransmitter systems, including opioid system, serotonin, sigma, and NMDA receptors, while its metabolites primarily act as a serotonin reuptake inhibitor and opioid receptor agonist. So here, when we're looking at ibogaine, and we're just so much more we need to know about what I just shared with you. When we're looking at ibogaine as a African solution to addiction, we really are going to have to take responsibility for this. That's what the whole Kujichaguali villages are about. Us, you and I, taking primary responsibility for how it is that we intend to live. Now, we are waiting for Dr. Steph to reconnect. And the way it went off, it was a very abrupt disconnection. So I understand what that means. When you're in a place like Jamaica and just all of a sudden like that, the site or the stream just disappears, that's usually an indicator that there is indeed something going on that we need to be paying attention to. Meanwhile, I'm going to just take a moment here and remind you of the Kujichagulia villages vision that Dr. Steph and I are talking about. So I've got this up here. It's in a folder. I'm going to take you through a few folders of the Kujichagulia villages. I've got this right here, Kujichagulia villages, and I'm going to take you through a folder which is different images from the Kujichagulia villages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this image right here. The villages are opening up, and I am now going to share the screen, and you can get a chance to look through the Kujichagulia villages while we are waiting once again for Dr. Steph to rejoin the conversation. I've got Kujichagulia villages up. Here they are. They're on the screen. I think you see them right there. And let's just take a brief tour, if you don't mind, through the Kujichagulia villages. And these are intentional communities using traditional African motifs, culture, and of course, our intention is exactly what it is. Kujichagulia villages. I'm going to expand this just a little bit. And let's take a tour through the village, an AI tour through the village. Here we have the father and his daughter. And look at the roundhouse homes with the thatched roofs. We're going to be copying that style from traditional African homes. And we are going to be modernizing, of course, the interiors and the renewable energy and everything else will be modernized for our village sake. Going through, let's keep touring the village. We see a raised bed garden in the Kujichagulia village This particular garden is for growing herbs. We were talking about the herb necessary for us to detox ibogaine. Well, let's go with it and let's grow it our own selves. I do have friends in Kenya currently are developing traditional African herbs for which we aim to create long-standing, long-lasting partnerships. We will help to build her business up, and she will in turn help us to give a purpose to our villages. More images. I hope you like them from the Kujijagale villages. And Guvu, you tell me what you think about looking at the Kujijagale villages. This is a village with, this is a rendering of village gardens. So the village gardens, of course, are a raised bed. That's my style of growing. And as far as I am aware, it is the most efficient style for growing our own food insofar as water usage and growing space. So Kujichagulia villages, here they are. Our villages are intended to be laboratories as well. So from my vision, from our vision of the Kujichagulia villages, let's include the laboratories. Let's name the laboratories after those brilliant scientists that we know on this side of the great water. Looking at children playing in the Kujichagulia villages, they say that when a village no longer has the sound of children's laughter, the village is a dead place. Unfortunately, in America, our cities are turning increasingly into dead zones. The children are laughing, but the problem is in many areas, children can no longer play outside, play in the streets under the supervision of the entire community. We aim to change that with the Kujichagulia villages. This is the round house design. This is, of course, two-story round house, but we imagine taking the interior of the roundhouse and altering it to the modern standards that we have become accustomed to living in the West. And so this would be somewhat a luxury roundhouse, Kujichagulia village style. What do you think? Kujichagulia villages, again, this is the village outdoors with the gardens and the streams and the herbs and the roundhouse. We can see the solar attachments to the roof of the roundhouse, as well as in the background, you may see the windmills, the wind generators, solar generators. And there will be, of course, biomass development for using our waste to develop methane gas in the Kujichagulia villages. We are continuing, we're going ahead with the dialogue. Next image, we see the cultural aspect of our Kujichagulia village, the drummers, the dancers, the people gathered in the village to celebrate what they do. This is one of our main intentions, cultural integrity for preservation of our own distinct cultural integrity. And we will, I think everyone in the village should be trained in the use of the drum. Kujichagulia village is a plan for self-determination, must include as its core the family. And you're not seeing any bizarre combinations of the family here. We are traditionalists. As Africans, Africans are conservative traditionalists. So we believe in a mother, a father, the children. And we do believe that not only this combination works real well, but this combination is worth us fighting against the West to preserve for our future. I hope you do agree. If you don't agree, you let me know. This is a vision of the Kujichagulia villages as it's getting towards that golden part of the day. Different designs here, but all still styled around the roundhouse with a thatched roof. Solar panels available on each of these will all contribute toward the village having its own source, renewable source of energy. Very, very important. Kujichagulia villages, this might be considered like comparable to an apartment complex, but in this case, we're using the roundhouse designs to preserve the integrity, the culture, and preserve the ability of people to share space in common, but still be able to enjoy the space necessary to preserve our own African inheritance. And look at the pathways. Aren't those absolutely gorgeous? That you would traverse this complex using these wooden pathways, etc. There is a lot that we can do with our own ideas. And of course, is there no greater purpose for our own village than the veneration of our elders? The veneration of our elders, our honored, respected elders, the scholars who have been working all of their life to give us purpose, to give us direction, to give us a future. The relationship between these children and these elders must last long, long time beyond the legacy of any one of us. That is our true legacy. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the Kuji-Chagalia villages. I hope you have enjoyed this brief tour of the Kuji-Chagalia villages. And I hope that we will begin to build these all and that we will eventually move forward with the Kuji-Chagalia villages. Today's conversation was all about funding the Kuji-Chagalia villages. Does anybody have any comment you want to share before I go forward? And on that note, I'm going, first of all, I'm going to offer you a chance to get your hands on our master blueprint. This small book, seemingly small book, has over 110 economic plans and ideas and strategies for developing these villages to be sustainable. And just to give you an idea, and this book is excellent. I see pictures of us at one of our Kuji-Chagalia villages. In fact, this book contains pictures from all of our developments at the villages. There's Khalifa's Kuji-Chagalia village. There is another village in North Carolina where we were just not developing, but they were developing, and we did partner with them. There is, of course, from the Kuji-Chagalia villages, it was at the Oyotunji African village, us building the projects out there that we built, and the images from the Colfax Kuji-Chagalia village. We love them. We love them. We love them. But here's what I want to share with you from page 25 of this book. I'm going to read to you something I think is incredibly important. This is from a document entitled Notes on Social Engineering. Social engineering. This is the Hegelian dialectic. It says, and I quote, sufficient financial backing for regular utilization of mass media, constantly to communicate the desired objectives to the common man. New values can be deliberately created, disseminated, and accepted as personal and collective goals highly desirable of achievement. But the concerted effort of the major social institutions, particularly the educational, recreational, and religious, must be enlisted with the ready cooperation of those in control of mass media. By utilizing the various tested devices, our modern genius in advertising may alight upon simple phrases, well organized in sequence and timing, and coordinated with other efforts geared to realize the grand design. But there are required a host of laborers with plenty of financial backing. A host of laborers with plenty of financial backing. This is why I'm asking you to support the vision. If you cannot support the vision, then someone else is going to step in and pick up your burden, your load. That is the fact. We are intent about creating the villages. We are intent about making the villages move forward by any and all means necessary. The book is real inexpensive. It's only $10 plus $4 or so for postage. You should get this book, Kujichagulia Villages, a practical plan for self-determination. If nothing else, just to have that recipe, that formula for social engineering readily in your mind so that you can see it. It's happening all around you. People are engineering this society, and unfortunately, for the most part, they are not engineering it to fit our vision of what we want to do with the future. So on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in. You can get the book, Kujichagulia Villages, and I highly recommend that you do get the book. Get the book, Kuji, Kujichajulia Villages at http keidi.biz/CRP 2012. I highly recommend that you do, everyone out there, get this book. It's really a great investment, a great investment. You will not regret investing in the book. And as also, I would say this much, is that because we are so determined on this goal, this has been persisting around for about, we have been working on the villages since the days that we were living in black, LIB. And we developed 4 sites here in the US. But unfortunately, we ran out of momentum. And at the time, I had a different attitude than I have now. And at the time we were developing the vision in this country, I had the attitude that, well, if others won't help, then I'm going to just take a step backwards and wait for them to catch up. I don't have that attitude anymore. Nowadays, my attitude is, this is my life legacy here. If nobody else wants to help, I have to do this for my own self. And if it comes down to it, as we are successful, then in the long run, I will allow everyone else to share credit for what was in the beginning and has always been a brilliant idea. I will allow everyone else to claim credit for it. Why? Because it's bigger than me. It's bigger than us. It's bigger than any group of us. This is for our children, for our children's children. This is for future generations. This is for those African masses where over 50% of the population in many African nations, maybe most African nations, is under age 18. Africa is the youngest part of the planet. And as Africans, we must take responsibility for giving our children wealth. We must take responsibility for steering the leadership into the right attitude. Stop grabbing and taking for yourselves and secret it into overseas bank accounts, which was exposed in the Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers. Stop doing that. Stop making these deals with the IMF and the World Bank and other financial institutions, Deutsche Bank, the what's it called? The Bank of England has a bank. I can't think of it right now, but these banks don't have anything in common with us for our children's future. We want to buy a new future for our children with these permaculture campuses that we call Kujichagulia Villages. So on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. You will hear about the Kujichagulia Villages again and again. We will be talking about them in the future. We will be building them for our children's sake, for the future. And the bottom line really becomes, What are we going to do? When are we going to start to act? Get the book, Kujichagulia Villages. Don't even wait until tonight. Get the book right now. It's just 10 books. I do encourage you to go to Amazon, look for Kujichagulia Villages, and get it there. But you will also see that I have an extensive catalog of books there on Amazon. So if you are in UK, if you are in Europe or Spain or Turkey, go to Amazon. So I don't have to pay the exorbitant expense of shipping the book to you from the United States. You will be able to get the book from your local market, which includes Japan, South Korea, and other countries around the world. We have had a great week here on LIBRadio. It was a very good week. And we did a lot of very good programming. Most of it this week was centered on health. When we come back next week, I'm going to change our general topic, and we are going to continue to build for eternity. That's what we have to do. That's what we can do, and that's what we take primary responsibility for, building for eternity. And on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. You've been tuned into your favorite. We hope to be your favorite. We are LIBRadio. We are LIBTV. We are most certainly livinginblack.com. Thank you all. Thank you for tuning in. And on that note, we are out of here for this week, and we will be back again tomorrow. Actually, you can come to our free class that we're doing tomorrow, and we'd love to see you in the class. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you on your favorite LIBRadio, LIBTV, livinginblack.com. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.